Hello, C2E2, and welcome to the best little comic book channel on YouTube panel. I'm Sal.
I'm Tiffany.
Now, normally, it would be all four of us, but given coordinating schedules, we were losing 50% of our cast today. That would be Ben and Ethan, but they do send their regrets, and they wish they could join us today. And hopefully they'll watch the panel at some point and see what they missed out on.
It was a lot.
It's a lot. You're going to really get the full, naked details on how this channel is run.
Oh, and, details. Yeah.
That's right. No. It's not going to be anything less than an open book as far as how this channel is concerned, and no X ratings going on anywhere else. So
that's good.
Cool. I promise. If you're not familiar, welcome to this virtual panel in Chicago. I myself only been in Chicago one time, and it was a layover. Tiffany, you ever been in Chicago?
Never. I haven't gone like anywhere, so it's like always a good bet. I've never been there.
That's fair. I wish I'd been to Chicago. I'm fascinated by the city. There's a lot of movies I like that take place in Chicago.
They have a lot of wind.
As I understand it, they manufacture or export wind.
On the daily.
Is my understanding. Yeah.
The main export of Chicago.
Exactly.
That and casseroles.
I will also say that specifically regarding, yes, pizza casseroles, that is. Regarding C2E2, many people think I've been to it.
I thought you had too.
Even my beloved wife, Tiffany, who is a member of this channel, thinks that I've been to this show. I've never been to this show, and it's because years ago, we were part of a podcast network called The Weekly Pull, and two of those people who no longer do that show anymore went to C2E2 and did a whole panel, and they were like, yeah, you were on that panel. And I'm like, never been to Chicago.
No, it's funny. I knew you weren't on a panel, but for some reason I still thought you went. I think it's because you went to that Canadian thing.
Yes,
as well.
I did go to a rival con.
I'm not even going to mention it by name.
Yes, an inferior show.
But that's why I think, I don't know. I have no excuse. I just have no idea where you've been and what you've been doing.
That's fair. And as it should be. But no, so here's how it's going to work. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of the industry. We're going to talk about the comic book industry, that is, and the YouTube industry. We're going to talk about our channel, how we run it, and where it's going in the future. And then we're going to open the floor up to a bunch of questions, which we, thanks to this virtual show, actually got ahead of time, thanks to our Patreon, patreon.com/ComicPop, and our Discord, which you can join if you go to our channel and click any video in the description. Every link that you ever need from our channel is in the descriptions of every video we make. So
great.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm excited for it because we got some really, really fun questions, and so I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we do, so here it is. This is, why did I call it the best little comic book channel on YouTube? And I say it's because we offer
because
it's true, because I don't lie, and here's the truth. We are the best little comic book channel on YouTube, and I say little because we've been at this for 8 years now. I'd say, 2005 or 2015 till now, and now is almost 2022.
Yeah.
So, and we actually been doing it before 2015, but 2015 is when we changed the name and then became ComicPop and did it kind of full time.
Absolutely.
As well, or at least I did it full time.
Yeah, I don't.
No. And that's an so here you go. What is ComicPop? ComicPop is a comic book YouTube channel, and actually now a channel network where 4 of us, that is to say myself, Tiffany, and our other invisible compatriots, Ben and Ethan, talk about comic books to some degree, and give our commentary on the industry, on stories, on character, and informational, factoids about all of that. And it started out as one channel and then grew or broke. It depends on what your definition of it is, because of how things worked in the YouTube spectrum. But as it started, we were like, here's a channel about comic books. Originally, it was a sketch channel, which, that was...
We tried that.
We did. We tried that. We were like, hey, sketches, we're funny. And we found it was hard to make.
Yeah, we're not that funny. We're not that kind of funny.
We're not that kind of funny. Yeah, we need a prompt of some kind. And so we found that my reviews for comics were getting more views than anything else. And I was like, I know something about comic books. We'll talk about that. and we immediately launched into back issues. Like back issues did not take. Back issues are made flagship show where I take a comic book, or Tiffany takes a comic book and breaks it down, talks about it, and explains it to two co-hosts who didn't read it and have very little context for that story. And that's a site of contention and interest for a lot of people. Some folk love this premise, some folk hate this premise. But the reason why the premise exists in the first place is because I've been producing back issues for much of my life, where I've explained a story, character, comic book to people who have no context for it. And they always ask really funny or insightful questions that the comic book audience, normal, regular, everyday readers, just don't have the context for. They're so familiar with the subject that they don't think to ask, why? Because they take it for granted.
Yeah.
And so I found these really interesting questions could be the fodder for a future career in YouTube, and it's served us well. But Back Issues was the first show we made. It was like, boom, that's the show. And it was, so Tiffany, you came up with the idea, put the camera down, set it up, film it, and we produced that show.
Yeah.
And immediately I was like, our production value sucks. We got to move. And we moved it into a comic book store where we had access to books. So we were doing another show called Off the Rack, which has evolved over the years into a comic book review show, starring ourselves. Actually, it's very similar to what we're doing right now. And then it expanded, and from 2015 to I guess about the last 3 years or so, we produced, I don't know, let's say a dozen different shows for the channel. Creating,
I could, yeah.
Right, you can name probably a dozen comic.
I don't know if I can name a dozen, but yeah, it's up there.
Let me think, because we did one show where it was called Done in One, where it was explaining a character or story in less than a minute. That's one. Dramatic Comics, which was a show where we dramatically reenacted key moments in comic book history.
A couple of scenes.
Yep, couple scenes. Secret Wars TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read. That was our Secret Wars exclusive show, which took place during Secret Wars, where we just, each of us grabbed a series of books and then explained them. That was fun and did really well for our channel for a while, by the way.
Yeah.
Back Issues, Off the Rack, Elseworlds Exchange, which is our podcast show where I and a co-host talk about a subject for about an hour. Sometimes it's a comic book creator interview show. Other times it's more just like a evergreen, hey, what are the best Batman costumes of the multiverse? Or hey, what's DC gonna do in the future with the change in management, that kind of thing. So what are we on, 6?
Yes.
Okay, not bad. Okay. GBU are The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is a show we still produce today, which is a show where we all read 3 comic books that are united under some kind of theme, and then talk about, we rate them after we explain them, and it's kind of like, which one's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And those are the criteria, like good, bad, ugly. And if anything's especially heinous, goes in the wrong box, where we collect all these really, really egregious comic books, and that goes over there. So that's what, 7? Okay.
I got an easy 3 more.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hear
them.
Comic Line, where it's much more intensive, kind of like news desk analysis comic book discussion show, where we talk about, but usually news in the industry. A key creator leaves the company, or a new tech company is setting the industry on fire, or something to that effect, and we'll talk about it for about 45 minutes or so. That's a good show.
Letters Page.
Letters Page, where we open up letters and packages from the audience. We find that we have a really, really tight-knit audience of incredible people, and they have sent us through our P.O. box so many different amazing things, either like candy from their countries, or letters that express their fondness for the channel, or
just tell us their story,
or just tell us their story about who they are, where they came from. And we find that, like, if we can dedicate a whole show to that and keep it alive, we do so with Letters Page. So that's another show.
Comic
Fights, we did that one. Remember that
was
show?
A thing we did.
That was very similar to a show that existed, that I don't think exists anymore, which was very popular, where it was basically just a debate show. Take 2 characters, who would beat the other. It was kind of like a
it was like it wasn't even like that necessarily. It was trying to pitch which idea was better.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That was a fun show.
That was a fun show. And so then I also had a early show that, like, it disappeared quickly, but Hack and Splash.
Hack and Splash page, which was Tiffany is a much more indie comic book reader than I am. And her insights, as your background is in art, and so you have a unique perspective on a particularly artistic medium like comic books, and indie tends to kind of go in that direction. So you married those two elements together into a show where you and it also attached your interest in filmmaking as well.
Yeah, that last episode was my favorite.
Oh yeah, that was
nobody
on
cared.
East of West.
Yes, no, it wasn't East of West. It was oh my gosh, what was it? It's the volume is Flora and Fauna. It's
yeah, Manifest Destiny.
That's it. Yeah, that episode I went out on a high note.
You did. That was a great episode.
I love that episode. I'm proud of it to this day. It was years ago, and I'm like, yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done.
That was really cool. No, no way. Your best work is yet to come, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But anyway, that
was 11. I couldn't come up with another one except I know you've done
specials and one shots. And
and where to start, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
ComicPop After Dark.
After Dark, which is just a live stream where sometimes I'll just jump online at
a dozen shows.
At least a dozen shows, because I could think of at least a couple more.
Okay.
Like Tiff's Picks, which was a show where you just
that had one episode.
Yeah, whatever. It's still a show we made. In any case, we're a prolific YouTube channel, and we've made a lot of different types of content, specifically ingrained in the comic book world over the last 6, 7, or 8 years.
And if you've made it this far into the video of us just patting ourselves onto the back, now we're going to get into it.
Yeah, now we're going to prove to you why we're the best. No, it's not about that. It's more about introducing you to what we are and kind of talking about the world of comic book YouTube, because it's such an interesting place, and it's so different from where it started, and where it started was so odd and undefined, and I think it hasn't changed much in terms of definition and expectations. The expectations are either through the roof or non-existent, and the definitions don't exist. There are no definitions about what ComicTube is,
right?
Especially when you introduce other competing elements like Comic Talk, like TikTok, and the comic book spectrum over there, which is a whole other ball game, which maybe we'll get to. But in the meantime, I just mentioned the fact that we called it this title because I was we've been kind of pushing a rock up a hill for 7 or 8 years, and we've been producing content that is emblematic of our desire to be creative and to talk honestly and openly about this medium, which we all love. And that has not necessarily yielded millions of subscribers or hundreds of thousands of views, but we do well enough. There's an old there's an old joke, I think, and I don't remember the whole thing, but I'll just say the punchline, which is I do okay. It's just we do okay. We do all right here at ComicPop. And while we have never quite blasted through that glass ceiling, I think we've made a really interesting reputation for ourselves. And
well, I like to say that for us, it's more about our community, because we have actually grown a community. And there is a value on that maybe can't be expressed in terms of a monetary value necessarily, but it is an incredible value.
Oh, absolutely. No, we have been forever defined by our community, and it's its passion and its dedication and its uniqueness, and there's nothing like it. I mean, every time we do pre-pandemic years, when we did meet and greets or panels like these, the outpouring of kindness and generosity and creativity has just been overwhelming. So we're really, really lucky to have that kind of audience out there, which we've cultivated thanks to this world that we live in, this online space that can't be defined. But yeah, ComicTube is really interesting, and it's and our place in it has always been kind of just I like to think of us, as a buoy that's just kind of we never sink, but we're just kind of going with the flow. Things are happening, and storms will come and rage, and we'll just be okay, that was pretty crazy. Oh, hope I don't capsize. Because when it first started, we came about around the same time as Benny the Comic Historian and others Variant from Variant, Arison Variant, and more. And we all kind of carved out our own niche, what we're doing, how we talk about comics or how we approach it, and all came about around the same time. And then the world just kind of like went in another direction. It was interesting to see like
Right.
how you could, because of course around that time Avengers had made $1 billion and changed the discourse about comic book adaptations and the culture at large's search/demand for more information about that world.
Right.
And so we were lucky benefactors of that kind of shift.
Yes.
Or beneficiaries, I should say. We weren't benefit. We didn't bestow that
No.
news. We drank from it. I would say.
Yeah, we did.
And then things started to change in an interesting way. It blew up. People really started to find their niche, and I think that's representative of the culture at large, where like it used to be you watch TV, right? TV. Now, TV, of course, for those of you who aren't watching, was a thing where people used to produce content for it, and you didn't know what was going to be on there, and you just cycled through all these different channels using a magic little square.
Right.
In any case, TV, they made stuff, they put it on there, and they had their metrics and their test audiences, but for the most part, they just kind of threw stuff at the box, and people were like, well, that's what's on the box, I guess I'll watch it. And then culture started to curate its content. Cable came about. Comedy Central, so a place just for comedy, just 24-hour news networks. And it started to reflect what people's browsing habits. And now we're at a place where it's like, I don't watch, like, you can imagine a world where like a colleague of ours, Comics Explained, Rob from Comics Explained, he had a channel originally called Marvel Explained. And I remember there being great debate about whether he should include DC content. Like, that's how crazy things were.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he did.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm sure he is too. But my reason for bringing it up is because, like, nowadays, I'll bet you could get away with doing, because I remember he made Marvel Explained, and then like when we were debating it, he made DC Explained, and he had 2 different channels, and then he went, I should make it all Comics Explained. That's when things really turned out well for him.
Yeah.
But I can imagine, now, right?
Like, because there's the word that you'll hear all the time, the algorithm.
Yes.
Right? You'll hear creators mention it a lot. And sometimes it sounds like it's an excuse to not want to do something or to do something.
Totally.
But it is real. Even if no one can quite identify it.
No, yeah.
It's real.
It's just like YouTube doesn't, it's so big and so many like things are uploaded at so many times. Like, there's like 17 million times the course of human history is uploaded to the cloud like every 5 minutes. They have to generate like something to curate and manage that content, and no human being could check it all. So they have like this algorithm that kind of like monitors what you watch and shows you the things that you watch and maybe some things that you'd want to watch based on what you have watched.
Yeah.
And that's the algorithm, right? That's the thing that we're talking about. And they change that algorithm based on their own internal ideas and also like what they want to do. And YouTube has always wanted to be considered a like media group. Like, they want to be considered like the replacement for TV or a competitor to Netflix or something like that.
Right.
And as a result, like, they have to change the way they do their operations through automation and algorithmic like adjustment, so that they can be perceived as such. Like, it used to be just you just upload your day at the zoo or your or
and you still can.
And you can still do that, but YouTube is very interested in being a place where you go to get content instead of going to like a streaming service or television. And so because of that like desire, they kind of like have to force things to move and change. And when they do that, like, things break and then they got to refix it. And it's become this whole thing. in any case, my point being originally was that now you can curate your own content. You can kind of go like, oh well, I don't really watch, like, I love comic books, but I don't read Marvel, or I don't read, or I only read indie.
Right.
And so you saw the comic book YouTube space kind of fragment into like, okay, like those guys talk about comic books, but like, where's the channel that only talks about Hellboy?
Yeah, right.
Right? And
Mhm.
and as a result, like, it splinters into 1,000 or 10,000 different little channels,
Mhm.
and there's only so many people who are watching, so it just completely fragments the audience and changes,
Mhm.
and then of course it reaches critical mass, and then we get a, you know, we get a reckoning, and then things change, and channels close, and or get bought or whatever. So the world of comic book YouTube has changed and evolved over the
Yes.
last 5 years because, of course, like, it's the internet. One might say that TV almost still hasn't changed in 100 years,
Mhm.
but YouTube has like evolved or changed like 20 times in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
So it's just because the internet makes everything just that much more amplified, and that you got to go faster.
Mhm.
It's like dog years. So yeah, but as the winds change and as things grow, so do we. And so about a year ago now,
Mhm.
we decided to make some changes of our own. As I mentioned,
Almost a year. I don't know if it's quite.
no, I think you're right. I think like only a few months ago we said it was 6 months. I think we're coming upon a year. We're getting there.
Yes, but we're not quite there.
We're not quite there. But we well, why don't you tell them what happened, and what were the challenges we were facing at that time?
So it's a conversation that we had talked about for a while because really at Comic Pop, we tend to agonize over some changes, but like in a good way where it's like we need to have a real conversation about this. This is what Sal does for a full-time job. Um so it was something that wasn't made lightly. And so
No.
the conversation was the way in which the algorithm is headed. We have our main show, Back Issues, which is it's you could look at the channel and be like, well, obviously that's the main show. And
Right.
almost so that you could just call the channel Back Issues.
It's true.
Um, but we decided that with all the other shows, the much like many of the 12 that we listed earlier, maybe they were hurting the channel
Yeah.
because of the algorithm
Right.
and the way in which the algorithm was like, well, you put this out and it did well, but then you put these other things out and like not as many people watch them because that curated desire by individuals utilizing YouTube to like only see the things that they really want to look at. Well, it's like I only really want to watch Back Issues. I don't want to watch this.
Right.
So that sends a
Or
message though.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That sends a message to YouTube going like, they don't want to watch the channel, as opposed to learning like, they don't want to watch this show.
Yeah, because it used to be that YouTube really liked the variety, the diversity of
Yes.
content. And they're like, wow, like, you're a channel who makes a whole bunch of different shows.
Yeah.
And then they shifted to, well, if they don't watch that, if they don't watch every video you make as much as the last one, then it's a failure.
Mhm.
Or then it's not being successful. It's not a viable channel, and we'll show it less.
Yeah, we won't recommend it to other people who may have similar interests, but because they're perceiving this input in a specific light,
Yeah.
it's doesn't end up working out for us. So we decided that what we would do is we would break out
Yeah.
all the shows that weren't Back Issues to another channel and call it Comic Pop Returns and put all of our reviews, like, Off the Rack goes over there. So our weekly live show, Elseworlds Exchange, another live show, but then is, uploaded afterwards. And then also like GBU and anything else we might want to do just goes
Letters
over
page.
there.
Yeah.
And what it afforded our community the opportunity, which initially we were like, oh my gosh, was this the right decision? Because we went from having the main channel have at least
4 or
3
5
to
different
4
shows. Yeah.
yeah, like 3 to 5 shows each week going up to 1 show a week going up,
Yeah.
and, expecting or hoping that our audience would go to this other channel because maybe with the main channel, if you had, like, Off the Rack or Elseworlds go up, maybe someone who doesn't normally watch it might check it out live
Yeah.
one day, right? But now we were saying, like, "Okay, they're going to have to go and seek this out." So we did a bit of a transitionary period. We moved it over there, and in the long run, I'm fairly happy with it. I feel like Back Issues is performing as it has been. So take that as you will, but it's no longer being hurt.
Exactly. Yeah. Back issues. The idea was that if we put out back issues, and back issues get like, hopefully the bare minimum is 20,000 views within the first week of its release. Then we'd release like a live show that would get anywhere between 300 and 500 views during the live stream, and then about probably hopefully 8 to 10,000 views within its lifetime, within its week-long lifetime.
Right, which is a nice number.
It's a nice number for that kind of show, but when you
if you're looking at that from an algorithm standpoint, they're like, oh, that's 50% or less of the audience of this show.
Exactly.
So people must not like this.
Yeah, so we basically, we cut the anchor off of the legs of back issues. So back issues will sink or swim based on its own merits as opposed to an arbitrary algorithmic decision to hurt the main show.
Well, another reason why this is helpful for us is it has helped to like advise us to make better decisions, because now we look at ComicPop Prime, as we come to calling it, but just ComicPop.
Yeah.
And instead of wondering if something else is hurting back issues, we can be like, okay, like, was it like a book that just didn't hit? Was it a holiday weekend? Was it the timing upon which it was released on its normal day? So we can really start to make educated decisions about this, because here we have this channel now that's like just this, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we're also, at least on that channel, seeing fewer people go, I didn't get notified of this.
Right.
Because that's a thing as well. If you're going to make a YouTube channel, you always, if you're watching a YouTube video, more than likely you're going to hear someone go, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell, right? Because that bell means like, oh, I want to get notifications from this channel. And you can determine what notifications you want to get. There's like 3 levels, like no, some, all. I always go all.
All is actually, it's funny because I firmly believe there is no difference between some and no.
All. Yeah.
Like, I think it's either all or none.
Yeah, I agree. But we used to get that a lot on ComicPop, like people being like, oh, I didn't get my back issues notification that day. And sorry, there's a cat. And now I feel like we do still get it on ComicPop Returns, because that is a newer channel and it's still finding its legs. And I think YouTube's trying to understand how to sort that out.
Yes.
But I feel like we've seen it less on back issues, which means that like maybe something we did might actually be working.
Yeah. And we saw a great, strong opening for the new channel, ComicPop Returns, when we launched it, because we made a video on ComicPop where we said, hey, there's this new channel. This is where things are going to go. People jumped over to there. We didn't see a dip in subscriber base from the main channel. Nope. And we saw a nice chunk of people, pretty much the amount of views we on average got for those shows subscribed to the new channel. Which allows us to then experiment or try things, and it doesn't hurt anybody. And so
yeah, no, absolutely. And it really helps us to also make the content that people are looking for. Like, if YouTube is correct and people are going to channels because it's like, I'm looking for either very specific content, like I want a type of show from this individual or group, or like, there are instances where people just like the people. They just like the people there, and that's what they want to see, right? But like, it helps us to ensure that like we're putting out the content that our audience is looking for. That doesn't mean we can't try things, but it does mean that, we're better providing a service. Like, do we want to just make content that we want to make? For sure. But we also want to make sure that we're pairing that with content that we know our audience is looking for, because we do care about our community.
Absolutely. Well, and we know that, like, while the main audience should always be yourself when you first start producing content, you should, any YouTube guru or even YouTube themselves will tell you that, listen to your audience, and if you're making something that they don't watch or they don't want to watch, don't expect success, because they're not, you're not catering to the audience that you're trying to reach, and maybe there like isn't quite an audience there. I'm still firmly believe in the belief that like we are the best is yet to come in terms of our like our reach, like that we just need that one little thing. But
I hope so.
But in the meantime, I'm fine with this. Like, it's not like I'm waiting for a payday. Like, this is good.
Yeah.
What we're doing right now, I'm very pleased with it.
Right.
And I like that the only limitation should be our own desires and creativity.
Oh, for sure. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, like, what does this have to do if I want to start a YouTube channel? Like, what
Well,
does
that's
this
very
mean
true.
for me?
Oh, sure. That's a good question. Well, in that case, I wouldn't model your channel off of Comic Pop just because there seems to be a critical mass. But you, I think that in the scope of our approach, there are lessons to be learned about making your own channel, and that's
Mhm.
being aware of what you want to make. If
Mhm.
you there are people out there, very successful people on YouTube, who went, I want to be the most successful YouTuber. Like,
Yeah.
that was their goal.
Yeah.
And they studied the algorithm, and they worked very hard, and they figured out like all these little things, and they've succeeded, and they did it, and it's like and it's a revelation for them, and
Mhm.
it's paying dividends. But I think that if your goal is something as esoteric as I want to be the best like no one ever was, you will find that you can only get a couple of seasons out of that before you lose your steam.
Mhm.
It needs to be specific. You need to be like, I want to make this.
Mhm.
And by the way, what's interesting about that, of course, is like being open and willing and honest with yourself to be like, that might change over time.
Right. Right.
Um, and the question is like, what do you do then? Our colleague Benny the Comic Historian, when he gets the least bit weary or tired or like or finds another interest, what he doesn't do is take what he has and then forces that audience to try and watch it. He'll go, okay, no, if I want to be fulfilled and I want to make this thing, I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna make that. And he
Mhm.
created like 5 different channels over the last 2 years. And some of them worked out, some of them didn't. And for him, he's like, well, if they didn't work out, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I did it and I tried it, and I'm thankful for it.
Exactly.
And that's for us as well, and that's for you. Like, there's a lesson for everybody out there where it's like, be honest with yourself about what you want to make,
Mhm.
and don't force it.
Yeah, and, like, what you expect to get out of it, because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, like, that's something that maybe not enough, folk who want to start something creative like this, ask themselves, like, what are you honestly looking to get out of it? And it's
Yeah.
okay to be honest, especially if you're being honest with yourself or, like, in a
Yes.
journal or, like, whatever. Like, if it's just something where you're like, "Okay, like, I just wanna make, like, stories and share something." That's fine, but if you're honestly like, "I wanna make this and, like, be famous and
Yeah.
grow a community and make money off of this," that's fine, put it down. That way you know what you're looking to get, and then you can, like, try to adjust your trajectory and plan to that.
Yeah.
If you are someone who's just like, "I'm just doing this for fun," or like, "I
Right.
just wanna hang out with my friends and do something," like, if you wanna start a video podcast or a podcast and throw it up on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere like that, if your goal is just like, "I just like hanging out with my friends and I wanna give this a shot," and, like, if something comes of it, great, fine. You know what? Then no matter what happens, you're gonna be excited with what you end up with. Even if it
Exactly.
doesn't find, like, a huge audience, you're gonna feel satisfied with that. But if you are someone who's like, "You know what? I want this to be a business and I wanna make something out of it," then you're going to have to find either work for yourself and only have you, or find people who are willing to put that time and effort in, because the friend angle may not work then.
No,
Because
no.
that may not be their goal, that may not be their desire to do that as well, but, like, that's why one of the first steps is be honest with yourself, and it's
Mhm.
okay. You don't have to tell anybody necessarily, but, like,
Yeah.
be honest with yourself what your expectations are.
Exactly. Exactly. And be willing and open to change,
Mhm,
as things go. Not
mhm,
to change based on the wins, but rather change because when it's right for you, when
mhm.
it's time. There are a lot of dedicated members of our audience, like I said, out there who asked us some questions. I thought we'd spend some time and just jump into that. But if there's
Oh,
any,
sure.
before we do, let's like transition from the like this is who we were, who we are,
Mhm,
where we went, and how you can find your own footing.
mhm,
Let's wrap that up by being like, listen, out there, if you want to make your own channel, you want to make your own podcast, uh, you know, Tiffany had a great point about being honest with yourself and about writing it down and creating clear, defined goals.
mhm,
Um, Also, learning as much as you can, knowing the business, knowing the space that you're getting into. Not even business, throw that away.
mhm,
The space you're getting into. If you want to be successful or excited and playing with like TikTok or YouTube or Twitch, learn everything you can about that space, because
mhm,
as much as There are outliers who make what they want when they want on their schedule, and they're successful. They are the outliers. They are the exceptions to the rule.
Yep.
They succeeded because of something, not necessarily just because of like good old fashioned American gumption, but just also because of like a viral video or a time period when like something that they talked about was particularly exciting or
Yep.
popular. Don't use the exceptions to the rule as your exception to the rule. Like, learn the space. How does YouTube work? What are the like baseline like methods to have someone watch a TikTok video you made? Learn from everyone else. Don't make as many. You don't have to make as many mistakes because thousands of people already made those mistakes and you can learn from them.
Oh, for sure. I would also say though, like a couple of things. One, if you want to do this, just do it. I know it's really easy for someone to tell you that. It's another thing to do it yourself. I often fall victim of that, being like, oh yeah, I want to do this thing, and then years go by and I haven't done this thing. And guess what? Instead of regretting doing it, I regret not doing it almost every time, right? Two, the mistakes that Sal's talking about, like, yeah, try to avoid them, but make them. Because you're not going to learn to be better without making them. So that's why it's like, just start, just do it. Like, even if you don't have the best setup or like, oh, I got to spend, like, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money and get a microphone. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money and get like a webcam or, a setup behind you, your background. Just start because you need to make mistakes to find out whether or not you actually want to do this or if this is the path you want to go down. And then you can invest from there if you find a niche that you enjoy or fits in with those goals that you set earlier.
Agreed.
There's a YouTuber I really enjoy. His name's Struthless, and he does a lot of like life lesson kind of things, but he's got the 70% rule. Like when he's 70% happy with something or like he puts it out. Because you know what? That last 30%, to try to get to 100% happy with something or have 100% perfect, you're never going to do it.
That's fair.
You're never going to do it. And it's okay because you know what? Like no one else is going to notice.
Right.
I can't tell you like I've done graphic design. I make videos for my job, and I can't tell you how many things like I'll agonize over. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to fix this. But you know what? I'm at a deadline, so it has to be submitted. And those things that bothered me, they don't bother those people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that like I shouldn't strive to be better, but next time I'm going to work towards that. This time I got to put it out.
Yeah. It's funny. There's an old quote regarding making content that you're dissatisfied with, but the audience at large not noticing it. There's a quote that is actually attributed to somebody else, but it's George Lucas who said, "Films are never completed; they're only abandoned." And I think that's a pretty dour way to look at it, but it's also like for him, he abandoned A New Hope to just kind of like put it out there, and it became a phenomenon that is beloved by everybody. And every time he tried to go back and change history, he made it worse.
Yeah,
like,
it's
the idea is to move forward.
Yeah, you got to do it, and you got to rip the Band-Aid off, and it's gonna. For some people, they're going to not care and just going to put it out there and you're going to be like, move on and learn from it. And other people, you're going to look at it and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just put that out there. Oh, I'm embarrassed by it, whatever.
Yeah.
You know how many things that we've done in the past where I'm like, oh, I'm a little embarrassed by that. What we made, what I put out there. Like, but that was you years ago. This is you now.
Exactly.
And like, if you're like, oh, I really want to start this thing and you've wanted to start it for a while, I want you to imagine yourself 5 years from now. And put yourself in a position of like, I started it or I didn't start it, and then see how you feel about it.
That's
and
fair.
like, even if it failed, you did it.
Yeah.
Or you could be like, I never did it. Oops.
Right.
Missed my chance. Now I can't, or I don't have an opportunity or whatever. All right. So that's all. That's my final say on all that, I guess.
It's a good point. Hopefully, if you walk away from anything, I think that's the one to walk away from. So over on our Patreon, we had a couple of questions. Crazy Wild Chris asked, favorite back issues to record, but least favorite book you've done.
I did not like Strange.
Yes.
But I had a good time with that.
That's fair.
I'd also say, what was that Ghost Rider Venom book we did?
Spirits of Venom.
Spirits of Venom. I did not like Spirits of Venom, but we had such a good time with that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
In terms of favorite to record, because I was gonna say there's a.
Oh, I thought it was simultaneous. I thought you had to be both.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I don't think I don't know if I have one of those where I'm like, I hate. Oh, Future State or Future's End.
I thought you'd say omit.
Oh yeah, One Moment in Time was rough. As far as the book is, but the episode is fantastic. But yeah, Future's End was one of those books where I'm like, this sucks. Or at least I couldn't get excited about it. But
Mhm.
it was a big blast to
Mhm.
talk about. Chris Wolf, favorite comic book shop to visit for deals and favorite overall. Now this is very
Uh,
region specific.
yeah. For us, definitely. What's your favorite to just visit?
There's so many. I love visiting new shops, but I do have some old staples. Like I love visiting. If I'm in Wayne, I go to Zap Comics. If I'm
Mhm.
in Dover, I go to Dewey's Comic City.
Mhm.
I really like the Fortress of Solitude up in Newark.
Yeah.
That was an incredible shop.
Mhm. Mhm.
Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash is always a fun visit because it's not just a comic book store; it's also like a museum.
Yeah.
Um,
We've gotten some very good deals at Comic Fortress,
yes,
Dollar
Comic Fortress has
Trades.
a lot of good deals
Um,
there.
and one of my favorites to visit is Phantasm over in
Hmm.
New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Easily,
I just really like that shop. I like the
yeah,
town too. It doesn't that definitely helps, but like the shop itself, I think it's well curated. They have an extensive back issues collection and a secondary warehouse location. So
yeah.
sometimes they open that up, but like if you need something, give them a
They'll
call.
have it.
They'll find it for you.
They also have a great dollar book like option
Yeah.
sometimes. So like keep an eye out for them.
Yeah.
Noah says video you had the most fun recording. I think honestly one of the most fun recordings that we had recently was our Matrix parody
I was just gonna say
sequence.
Onslaught. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
our Onslaught episode.
I think each of us at Comic Pop has like this itch to make like movies,
Yes.
but none of us really have the skills to do so. So when we have a chance to like dabble and pretend like we're filmmakers, and like really put the talent on display, because you wouldn't necessarily guess or know it from Ethan, but like he's great at improv and he's like a really fun like actor to work with.
Hmm.
He's just a funny guy.
Yeah.
So
Corey wants to know your favorite character that you didn't like or didn't know about before doing the show. That's an interesting question because uh, there aren't too many characters that we did where I was like, I don't know them, but there are characters that I didn't care for, and I don't know if I've necessarily changed my opinion about most of them. But I will say that I was surprised based on doing the channel how much love there was for Ben Riley from when I started reading comics to when I started talking about them.
yeah. If it's ones that we don't if we can say that we still don't like, but we didn't know about before doing the channel, Red Ghost.
You're right. You didn't even know he existed, and
I didn't
then
know he existed, and I was a happier person when I
right.
didn't.
Now, what's your issue? Now, of course, if you're not familiar with the Red Ghost, he's a Fantastic Four villain who is originally a Russian communist
Uh-huh.
who has mastery over an army of hyper intelligent apes.
Yeah, and, like, I get it. I get, like, the, like, references because like, every time I say I don't like him because his name and the whole power set doesn't really jive for me, there's always someone who's like, "Well, it's red because of this, and it's ghost because of that, and it's apes because of that." Listen, I get it.
Yeah,
I
I
get
get
it.
why he's called the
I
Red
get it.
Ghost.
But, like, I his thing is he's an old man who has power over apes. He's really easy to take down.
Well, and his powers aren't really related to apes. Like it's just, and he's a red ghost. What's the ape angle? Like
That
it's like
and, like,
two
the
different things.
yep. People will say it's like, "Oh, because of, like, this very" I think someone said once it's because of this very specific thing, like, I don't know if it's an experiment or something like that,
Yeah.
whatever, but, like, I'm still like, I'm just not buying it. Just not buying it. I think it's just because comic books have a thing about apes.
I think so. Yeah, no, and that's a metric you can like set your watch to. That
Yep.
if you put an ape on your cover, at least at a certain time, probably about like 5 or 6 decades ago,
Yeah.
you would guaranteed sale increase. Miles wants to know what your favorite non-Marvel or DC book that we've covered on back issues was, and are there any third-party books that we'd like to cover in the future?
I'm gonna guess that doesn't necessarily count Vertigo because Vertigo is under DC, so I can't really
Technically,
say Sandman because that was a book that I was like, well, we're gonna do, it, and I don't think it's gonna do well, but I really wanted to talk about it with you guys, and
yep,
it was easily one of my favorite episodes.
easily.
I think it may be Saga.
It's got to be Saga.
It has to be Saga. When we made Ben cry. And like Ethan and I had such a great moment between the two of us realizing it was happening because nothing like that had ever happened before on
No,
the couch,
no.
and I was pretty new to hosting at that point.
Yeah.
I for me, it has to be Saga.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see that come back in the future. But are there any other third-party books besides Saga you want to cover in the future that you want to bring to the table? I think
Um,
Black Label technically counts because there's other books like The Nice House on the Lake.
yes.
Um, but
Yes, but that's also under DC. I don't know. It's hard to guess with that. Another favorite of mine was Witches.
yes,
That I
witches.
didn't expect to have the reaction it did from overall, and not necessarily on the couch. We were in a location for that one, but for the
Yeah.
future, I mean, I'd love to cover some of the Boom books. I just don't know how they're going to be received,
Yeah.
because I've had like a real infatuation with Once and Future.
Yeah.
Something's Killing the Children. I'd love to maybe one day do something with when it's finished, The Me You Love in the Dark.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
We did Sailor Moon. I do kind of wish we could do a little more manga and feel safe about it. But we never know. It's easier to work with if there's a copyright claim on a channel. If it's within the continental United States, it's a little easier to deal with that and get through it.
Yeah.
Than to add like a whole nother country set of like laws and rules. It's just kind of rough.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Kieran Sick wanted to know, and this is an interesting question because it speaks to our approach to success and views and stuff on the channel.
Okay.
But how has lowering views / popularity on the more out there books affected your like perspective? And that's in particular to like lately we've noticed, and we talked about like changes in the algorithm and stuff.
Mhm.
I've noticed, and actually it's one of those like it's not really a secret, but across the board, uh, comic book YouTube as a whole hasn't gotten worse. In fact, I've been doing some interesting internal math, and like everybody's doing fine. Everyone's
Er
growing, like more.
It's fine.
It's fine, sip, fire, but like it is fine in terms of like everyone who is on track is doing as well as they were and is growing more than they're losing views, subscribers, etc.
Okay.
But
But
not as quickly and not as voluminously per period, right? So
okay.
like used to be, if you had a successful video, you'd guarantee a certain number of growth.
Mhm.
And now that number proportionately to your size is like half or less than half.
Right.
It's just lower.
And I have theories on that.
I'd like to hear your theory on that, actually.
I think it's a combination of two things. I believe it's just fatigue overall.
That's fair.
I've experienced it with my own fatigue with like a YouTube channel that like I'll love, and I'll watch it like for like over a year, right? And then
Yeah.
one day I'll just kind of wane from watching like every video they put out.
Yep.
I've noticed that. I
Oh,
just get
yeah.
fatigued, and then I tend to come back, but not
Mhm.
always. Sometimes I just drop them.
No, I noticed that. That's a very strong thing that exists in the YouTube space where it's like you will love a channel and then just drop it.
Mhm.
And the important thing in our space is that we continuously remind the potential audience that we exist and
Yep.
have new blood come in.
Oh, for sure.
Because turnover is a thing.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. And that leads me to my next point. I think right now in a space in which the juggernaut of TikTok exists,
Yeah.
I think a lot of attention is split
Yes.
to there. And that is not necessarily just saying only a younger audience, because I think everyone, any age range can be on TikTok, but an overwhelming number of younger audience members are over there. So
Totally.
if a channel is reliant on that age range, you may be seeing less growth from that right now. Who knows? I'm not saying that like I'm not going to be the person who says like TikTok's going to go in like a year, because literally nobody knows.
Nope.
We've seen things like TikTok in the past come around and it just wasn't the right time. I think TikTok took the lessons from the past, have learned from them, have incorporated a lot of other social media platform ideas behind it, and just happened to hit at this perfect moment.
Yeah.
When the world was stuck at home. In particular, I think that helped.
phones.
They were already big.
Yeah.
That made them
But it
into
blew
something
up.
totally different.
Yeah, it changes the whole conversation. I mean, like Instagram and YouTube have both integrated TikTokian like trappings into their
Mhm.
system. We also we have a channel called ComicPop Shorts.
Yep.
Because we make content over on TikTok and it's the same format as like Instagram's Reels, as TikTok, and as YouTube to YouTube Shorts.
Mhm.
So it's like, well, here you go,
Yeah.
because the language by which people communicate with videos now is shifting or
Mhm.
changing, or at the very least adding that element of like, it's a few seconds, and when you make a podcast or you talk about a thing for an hour, the language is going to be very different. You're not be talking to the same audience.
Right. Right.
So that's shifted as well. So
But
I think that's a big factor as well,
I
like you
think
said.
it is for sure. And then in terms of like how it affects how we'll think about a book, like I said, like we don't want to be a channel that's only like, gauged by numbers,
Yes.
but we also have, much like I told you to write down your goals if you want to make this, we have our own goals.
Yes.
And so we do want to hit those, but that doesn't mean that like we'll never do like your favorite esoteric character ever. It just might mean it's going to take a little longer,
Yeah.
because if we have something that doesn't perform as well, we're going to want to try to again appease the algorithm and get people to have the video recommended to them again, so that we could do the whole turnover thing.
Yeah.
So it does like color our perspective on like, okay, like maybe we don't do something that's wild and out there, but occasionally we'll do, and then we're surprised.
Exactly. Yeah, you
It's
never
almost
know.
like you have no idea.
Well, that's very true, and that's the thing is like the only time we ever want to give advice about like making your own channel or starting
Mhm.
your own creative endeavors, we're giving you tools, not a map,
Yeah,
because
we can't possibly give you a map because we don't know exactly what each of you wants to do.
right, and honestly, neither does anybody else, and
No.
they, there are cottage industries developed for how to like show you the way, and then you'll be like surprised that it doesn't work, and it's like
Mhm.
you could have everything right. It's Picard has a great quote. What was it? It's possible to make no mistakes and still lose. That's not a
Yes.
weakness, that's life. And it's
Yep.
like, it's true. You could know all the tricks and still not succeed, and it's just because it was the wrong time,
Mhm.
or you have the wrong face, or it was on the wrong interface, or you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
it's really arbitrary, but and that's
Mhm.
very frustrating. But like creativity is not easy.
It's not, and you're gonna have to take your lumps, unfortunately, but, like, each time you do, like, it's hard because I think we've all experienced
Mhm.
it, but, like, those lumps, that quote unquote failure, don't make failure like a bad word, don't make it a four-letter word, like, don't make it something that's super scary. It's an opportunity to learn, and
Yeah.
whether or not that's an opportunity to learn in what you're doing right now or an opportunity to learn for something else in your future,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity.
Yeah. The Starry Man wants to know how we pick the books we cover. And it's a great question
Mhm.
because, like the arbitrary nature that I just described, it's very similar in that respect. I will occasionally, like, I usually pick the books, but
Mhm.
since you host the show as well, sometimes you'll pick them. Sometimes I'll pick them for you, where I'm like, you got to talk about this book.
Yeah,
Um,
because it'll be something. It used to be before you and I were doing Off the Rack together, it would just be something random I read. I'd be like, "Oh, I just read this, like, crazy book," and I'll
yeah,
describe it to you, and you'd be like, "We should do that."
that's a show. Uh,
And now that we're doing Off the Rack, there are books that I'll be reading, like, for example, in current history, Batman Reptilian, that, like, by the end of it, you were like, "Well,
that's a show.
we
Like,
gotta do this.
that's got to be an
We
episode.
gotta do this." But there'll still be moments where, like, 'cause, Sal will collect Wizard magazines, and I'll be looking through them, and I'll see, like, an old advertisement, from that, and I'll be like, "Oh, I kinda wanna read this." And then Sal will very lovingly go and find it for me, or I'll find it for myself. We did Batman Dead Man like
Yeah,
that, because I just saw an ad for it. I was like, "Oh, that looks crazy," and it was a great episode. I had a good time with
it
it.
was. It was a really fun
So it
episode.
could be as simple as that,
Yeah.
or something where it's like, Sal's
Oh, well,
like,
sometimes we try to coordinate it with, like, movie releases, and it
mhm.
doesn't really always work. It rarely
We kinda
gives
have
us a bump.
like, laid off from doing that.
Yeah, but, like, if it's such a huge like Spider-Man, obviously, if there's a Spider-Man movie, I'm gonna do a Spider-Man book.
Well,
Uh,
it helps too that that's a character you're passionate about.
it's true. Yeah, that's true. Jan wants to know if we still have an interest in writing comics and what comics would we like to work on. Um, yeah, I always wanna, like, do that. I come from a background of creating I used to make movies, I used to make comic books, and, uh I do enjoy creating in that respect. I haven't had a minute to really just sit down and like come up with a story, but sometimes ideas will just strike me and I'll write them down. And there are plenty of them. It's just a question of like actually having the rediscovering those muscles and exercising them to the point where I can actually like tell a story the way I want to. You?
I mean, I'm not a writer. I'm just not. I'm not like I'm not very good with writing. It's just one of those like skills I don't have, right?
Yeah.
But would I love to be able to tell a story like that? Absolutely. Do I think that I have any right to do that? Probably not.
Sure you do.
But I mean, like as much as anyone else, like I don't think because of what we do that I have any more right to tell a story than any person watching this right now. But much like I was saying earlier about how like don't be afraid to do it, just go for it. This is my thing. This is the one where I'm like, oh, I'd love to do this. And I've been saying, oh, I'd love to do this for years. And I haven't. So like, do I regret wasting that time? Yeah, a little bit. I just got to take that step to like get beyond that and just do it. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, just to do it. So that's my version of what you might be feeling right now for making a channel.
Yeah. Otis wants to know if we have any creators, any collaborators with other creators coming up. And that's an interesting question because we dedicate our Elseworlds Exchange podcast show to talking to comic book creators sometimes. And we also tried to incorporate more creators into Off the Rack so they can like plug their books and stuff. And I've been really asleep at the wheel as far as that's concerned lately, only because availability and Substack have actually changed a lot of the discourse in that regard.
Oh, for sure. And not only that, but I'd say that like this is like become con season now, apparently through December. So it's a little harder with creative sometimes, like sometimes.
Yeah. But as far as it, so in that regard, no, I don't have any creator interviews planned. But if you mean like the true spirit of like YouTube collabs, then yes, we have actually an unprecedented surprise, very brief cameo coming up on our episode, on our holiday episode of Back Issues, which you won't believe.
You won't believe.
And it's not Alan Moore. It's not a comic book creator.
It's not. It's a colleague. Like, what's the word?
We might have multiple colleagues on that episode. You never know. But watch out for that holiday episode. What was it? AA batteries. What are books that you'd really like to cover, but because of the numbers, you couldn't justify dedicating an episode of Back Issues towards? Now, AA batteries is a great point because, like, the problem is we want to do what we want to do, but if it doesn't work, if the audience at large says we don't really want to watch this, can't justify doing or dedicating that much time or energy to it because I want to stick around so that we can be successful enough to be able to do that down the line. Like, so if I prefer or lean towards like Batman or Spider-Man, more popular characters in favor of less popular characters, it's only to preserve the status quo long enough to succeed like in the long term. Because if I do a bunch of like really fun but like niche characters all, you know, in a row, it might tank the channel to the point where it's like, well, I can't do this anymore, so you'll never see those books. You'll never see more of those books. So and when I say tank the channel, I don't believe that it necessarily would, but it needs YouTube. You need the shot in the arm of success or a very popular video more frequently now than ever in order to maintain your space. So that being said, though, are there any characters that you'd like to do that you're just like, we can't? There's so many. So many indie books. I mean, like we would have already done Something's Killing the Children, Paper Girls, Once in Future, more Sandman would have been done. Saga would have already been we would have been caught up by now if it didn't matter. All those indie books. Hellboy, we would have done a whole episode about at this point because we decided that we were open to doing that again. I would have loved to have done like Savage Dragon, just by virtue of people's reaction to it. Wildcats would be a thing we'd easily have done. Like old Image books. Shadowhawk would have been a character I would have covered at some point.
Sleepwalker. I'm kidding.
Sleepwalker would have been a book I would have done. Yeah, you kidding me? If it doesn't matter, we would have done Shadow Man from Valiant. That would have been a book we would have done. Quantum and Woody was a book I wanted to do at some point, but we never got around to it. There's so much. But unfortunately, we're out of time.
I believe you're right.
So what I want to do is I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank you so much for checking us out over at youtube.com/ComicPop. Tiffany, why don't you end the show for us? Tell us any closing thoughts.
I guess my closing thought, like I said, is if you want to do this, just get going. Write it down, figure out your goals, and then just get going. Give it a shot. Give yourself a goal. Say, I'm going to make 6 episodes of my show.
There you go.
And then reassess and see.
And don't even share them. Just make them.
You don't have to. Just make them. Just absolutely just make them. and see where you want to go next. But like, don't wait.
Don't
give it a try.
Thanks a lot for watching, and thank you very much to C2E2 for having us. See you next time.
Bye.